Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with coach, trainer, speaker, author, and facilitator Bob Woolverton. He began as a numbers-driven, data-only style manager with a not-so-affectionate nickname in the workplace of RoboBob. At age 52, he went back to college and obtained a bachelor's degree and master's degree in both management and leadership. Then, after much hard work and personal transformation, a colleague declared on LinkedIn that he is one of the best leaders that he has ever had the privilege of working with. He spent most of his years in law enforcement and has always been a motivator and a leader. Enjoy this interview.
Excellent. Thanks for taking a minute out. I appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. Glad to be on your podcast.
Yeah, before we get into your life, I want to know, the last couple of years, COVID kind of threw everything into a tailspin. I'm wondering how you survived that time period and how subsequently it's changed the way that not only you live your life, but the way that you approach business.
Well, it's interesting because of COVID, there's basically everything went online. So when I was I teach my classes in person in a classroom style setting, face-to-face sort of thing. And I absolutely love that because the nonverbal communication that you get, you can tell if you're connecting, if your message is connecting with the student or not. And it's so much harder on Zoom, particularly when you've got a classroom of 30 or 36 people. So they're all little tiny bobbleheads, on your screen. But there's ways to keep it interesting to, keep the student engaged. But yeah, that online thing, I like the ease of it. I don't have to commute anywhere or so I like that. My biggest commute is going downstairs, but you definitely lose that interpersonal connection. That's the part that I miss the most. But, I've grown pretty comfortable with Zoom too.
I think that's probably one of the big takeaways from this pandemic is we realize that we need each other, the level of community. And I understand what you're saying about Zoom. I know doing doctor's appointments is so much easier instead of driving because you can get the same thing done. But at the end of the day, I think that connection to humans is a really big thing, and I don't know that we'll ever get over that yearning for that.
Well, and part of it for me, and this is kind of the selfish aspect of it, is when I was doing the classes in person, and basically I'd do a week-long class, and Friday afternoon things are wrapping up and handing out certificates of completion, and when the students were so inspired to go back to their organization to make positive changes, that's what inspired me. And I used to just get a real high from that the people that I worked with all week were so inspired to go back and make positive changes. And boy, I definitely don't get that effect on Zoom. Even though you might have some really good dialogue, you just don't get that sense of energy that you had, when you're in the same room with somebody. So that's, for me, it's kind of a selfish aspect because to me, that was so inspirational. That's why I kept coming back to do it. And the fact that people would get so motivated to, move forward and do great things in their, either in their life or with their company, wherever they were going. And so, yeah, I definitely miss that part.
So there's so many things on paper that are a part of who you are, and I'm going to kind of simplify it a little bit. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day. And one of them looks up at you and says, "What do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
What I do for a living is I help shorten future leaders' learning curve on how to be a good leader. Because we all struggle trying to learn how to be a good leader. It's just something that it doesn't happen naturally. It's a acquired skill. And because of my decades of experience, then I can help people become a better leader faster.
What did you want to be when you were in the third grade?
Gosh. If I can remember back to the third grade, my dad was in the Army, so every year I went to a different elementary school. And I'm trying to remember where was I? I was in Linwood, Washington, riding my bicycle to school back in the good old days when you could do that. I don't even remember what I wanted to do, back in the third grade. Which it's interesting because I look back on my life and even in just basically one generation, the changes in technology we've had and the exposure that our children today have to the whole world that, I didn't have. If you didn't have a set of encyclopedias, you basically had 3 channels on the television that went off late at night and came back on early in the morning, and radio. and that was it. And I can't even remember. Sometimes I remember one time I was out fishing with my dad, and we had a transistor radio in the boat when we were out on this lake fishing, and one of the pop songs came on, and I'm singing along to the song, but I got the lyrics incorrect because the audio quality was so poor. And my dad's laughing at me, goes, you've got the words wrong, And so, I had no idea just because the audio quality was so poor, and I was kind of translating the way I thought it was, and I was, happy to sing it however. But it's just interesting because, back then your exposure to the world was so narrow. And now it's so broad. It's like, I talk about even when I first got out of high school and you start into the marketplace to find a job, basically back then in my day, the way you found a job was in the classified ads of the Seattle Times. And that was basically the local job market. But now you can find a job around the globe with a couple clicks of a mouse. It's the ability to be more global now is just so amazing to me because of the rapid advances we've had in technology.
So with where you're at in your career right now, are you happy with where you're at with the dreams you had as a kid to where you're at right now? Are you happy?
Oh, absolutely. Because where I am right now is I'm comfortable enough that I get to work on the things that I'm passionate about. And that's what really inspires me, and that I've got control over my life, I've got control over my schedule, and I have control over what I focus my energies on. And to me, that's really inspiring. And the fact that, basically my focus is in service to others. My entire life has always been service to others. But in this regard, that I can help somebody become better in their service to others. And that's what really inspires me. So to answer your question, I am extremely happy where I am right now in life. And actually, I almost feel like I'm in a foot race because the more that I've accomplished, and of course, comparing that to the older I get, and then I'm looking at the obituary page going, I've lost some of my friends, some local celebrities that are younger than I have already passed, and I'm thinking, well, how much time do I have? I've got to hurry, move faster in this foot race. I might be running out of time.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the beginnings of your life, where you were born and raised, and kind of how these seeds were planted in you to become who you are today.
Well, let's see. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and my parents were very, 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 very young. And matter of fact, so young that my father's dad marched him down to the Army recruiting office and said, if you're old enough to have a child, you're old enough to join the Army. So that's why I said earlier, I didn't go to the same elementary school until the 6th grade, or 2 years in a row until the 6th grade, because being in the Army, we moved around so much. And so I was constantly having to make new friends and getting moved around, so on like that. So we never really settled in any one place very long. But then, let's see, I'm trying to remember how old was I. I must have been around 10 years old or so. My dad wanted to come back to the Pacific Northwest because he decided he wanted to be a Seattle police officer. He wanted to live here in the Pacific Northwest, and that's what he wanted to do. And ultimately, he got hired by the Seattle Police Department and did his career there. So this was, late 60s, early 70s. So then as I'm a student in school, that was civil unrest, Vietnam War, and all those eras, and police were not looked on very fondly. So it was difficult for me to make friends as a child because, oh, your dad's a cop, sort of thing. And it's like, well, I didn't pick that for him, So, even there were some challenges there. But, through school, I was really big into football and got a football scholarship to a liberal arts college in Montana, and I was a horrible college student, so that lasted 1 year. Came back, went to work for the Boeing Company, and worked for them for 4 years. And while I was working for the Boeing Company, I was also a resident volunteer firefighter. So I actually lived in a fire station at night, went to work at Boeing during the day, and then at night I would answer any calls that came in. And it was my job as the resident to, depending on the type of call, maybe pull the aid car out on the ramp or pull the pumper out onto the ramp and then wait for the other volunteers to show up, and then off to the call we would go. And but that was really my start into service of others, in essence. And from there, again, that was long before the internet. And the one thing that I didn't like about the fire service was being stuck in the fire station at night. Especially when we had to do the main duty or do overnight duty at the main station on weekends and stuff. And literally on a summer night, I'd be like walking the perimeter of the fire station, of the parcel of land that it was on, and I'm listening, like, for a car crash, like something happened somewhere so I can get out of here. I want to do something. I want to be busy. And of course, that's the days before internet and before cable TV, and I was just bored to death. So then I decided to pursue law enforcement, which, basically following in my father's footsteps. And of course, he wanted me to do other things rather than law enforcement. But I got hired in a law enforcement agency just northwest of Seattle, and I spent 34 years there and spent the vast majority of my time there in middle management and upper level executive level. And while I was doing that, I became a leadership instructor, got my bachelor's degree and master's degree in management and leadership, became a leadership instructor. And then I retired from law enforcement, and I continued doing my leadership instruction. So there's the 2-minute summary.
I like it. No, that's great. And I'm curious, in your life right now, and this probably is even, as an officer, what is it that motivates you every day that you wake up? What is it that drives you? And how do you quantify a good day at the end of the day? How do you look back and say, that was a good day?
Well, so when I get up in the morning, the things that really inspire me are the fact that I've got all of this, it's almost like a pent-up energy, but it's what I've gained in institutional knowledge, about leadership and being a better leader and leading an organization, particularly from the executive level. And I see so much lacking in the private sector, in the public sector. And I'm just so driven to share the information so that people can become better leaders. Because in my experience, I learned, initially I was learning my leadership from those people who were my bosses. Well, they learned from their previous bosses. And probably all along the way, even though they were well-intentioned, they didn't know what they needed to know about leadership to be effective. And even today, when I talk to line-level employees, and they talk about their biggest complaints, it's always micromanagement and lack of direction. And those are things that are so easy to correct if the leaders have a better understanding of their role and how to interact, rather than getting promoted and trying to be a really good technician just with a leadership title. And so when I can get people to change their focus and realize as a leader that they need to focus on results and understand the ways to facilitate the success of the people they're responsible for, that's what inspires me, because that just makes them better. And so I just feel like I have this pent-up energy of knowledge and experience to share with other people. And it almost kind of drives me crazy, because I wish I had a bigger audience, in essence, or that I could connect to a bigger audience. Let's put it that way.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the younger version of yourself, say in your 20s, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom that you've gained, the life that you've lived up to this point. What would you say to your young version?
Well, it's interesting, because so like I mentioned earlier, I went right out of high school, went to a liberal arts college in Montana, and I was not mature enough at the time to be away at a college. And so my first year at college was a miserable failure. Even though in high school, I would say it was an academic success. I graduated with a 3.85 GPA. I mean, I never could get straight A's. I always had 1 B, but everything was always mostly A's, 1 B, every report card sort of thing. But then I went to college, and I was not prepared for college whatsoever. So I would say that looking back, I think that worked out well for me, because I finally wound up going back to college at age 52. And the reason that I think that really worked out for me is because when I was going through the textbooks and reading all of that information, I had real life experiences to compare it to. So it made better sense to me. And I remember as I was going through these classes, I was thinking, if I had done this at age 19 and 20, where I had no life experience, had no work experience, they would have just been words in a book that I would have memorized long enough to pass the test, and then it would have been forgotten. But because I had, all of this life experience, all of this work experience, and I could compare the examples in the textbooks to real life experiences, it made far better sense to me. And that's why it really resonated with me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I felt like I missed an opportunity of decades, but decades earlier, I didn't have the experience to make the better sense out of it. So I don't know that, I wish I could have done that earlier, but I don't think it would have been as valuable had I done it earlier. So I don't know that it really would change anything. So it's kind of a paradox. It's kind of tough to say that I would do anything different, even though I just wish I had the knowledge, basically the experience of decades of experience. I wish I would have had that in my early 20s. It's kind of like, retirement's backwards. It's like we should retire young when we're young enough to enjoy retirement, and then work later when we can't get around too well.
I agree. I 100% agree. In all of these different capacities that you've had in your life, you've always been in control of it. So your family, your friends, your colleagues have all had an interpretation of your clients, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, that has probably changed a lot over the years, and I think that's probably common for a lot of people. You gain experience and your perspective changes. When you're younger, you're basically trying to find your way in life and trying to, get some money in the bank. When I remember my first year in college, I was, month to month sort of thing, struggling to have enough money to buy groceries. And so you're trying to at least, get a good shelter over your head as one of your first, accomplishments sort of thing. And so you're struggling, to get to that part earlier in life. So it's very much self-focused on what you're trying to accomplish. But then as you basically satisfy those needs, then you get more global in your perspective. And so I think that, over the time, that's the part that has really changed, because, you're struggling to survive when you're young, but then as you reach certain milestones in life, then you can turn and basically kind of give back, whether it's to the community, whether it's to your industry, or, whatever like that. And so I think that's probably the biggest changes for me is basically just where my compass is. I'm not so much struggling and trying to just survive hand to mouth sort of thing, as now my compass is more focused on, what can I do for others? What can I do for those around me? And I even find opportunities when I go to the store sort of thing. If I happen to notice somebody needs a hand with something, I don't hesitate to take the moment to give them the hand, because my focus has changed. And I think that happens for a lot of people, though. I don't think that it's unique to me. I just think it's something that occurs naturally as we mature and we gain different levels of success. So I would say that's probably the biggest change.
So, Bob, if anybody out there wants to learn more about you, your services, anything related to your world, where's the best place on the web for them to go?
Best place would be LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn at Bob Woolverton, and that's 2 O's in Woolverton, 2 O's in the last name, 1 O in the first name, not the other way around.
Bob, hey, thank you for opening up. Thanks for taking time out. Have a great 2023. I appreciate it.
Okay, nice talking to you. Have a good day.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube, Spotify, or on iTunes. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.